Good morning, friends. Let us dive into another case law which is related to termination of an employee from the banking sector, as well as this case law covers du- uh, duties toward employees working in private sectors. Friends, I am talking about the case law of Roger Mathew versus South Indian Bank Limited, which was decided in 2019. This case is important decision by the Honorable Supreme Court of India that dealt with the issue of employees' rights and disputes related to the termination of employees in the banking sector. Friends, the background of the case is Roger Mathew, here the petitioner, was an employee of South Indian Bank Limited. The case arose due to dismissal of Mathew from his position in the bank, which he claimed was unjustified. He contended that his dismissal was in violation of his fundamental rights and principles of natural justice. The dispute revolved around the validity of the dismissal and application of rules relating to employment contract and disciplinary action. The core issue was whether the termination of employment was done in compliance with the proper procedural safeguards under the Industrial Dispute Act 1947 or other relevant labor laws. So the major issues raised in this case were whether the dismissal of Roger Mathew was lawful and in accordance with due process and principles of natural justice, whether the South Indian Bank violated the provisions of Industrial Dispute Act 1947 in the termination process, whether the principles of procedural fairness were followed and employees' right to fair hearing was respected, whether an employer's decision to terminate an employee could be reviewed by the judiciary in the case of dispute and extent of the court's power in such matters. So the Honorable Supreme Court gave ruling on all points. The Honorable Supreme Court of India ruled in favor of Roger Mathew and concluded that the dismissal of the employee was not valid. The key aspects of the judgment are principle of natural justice. The court held that the principle of natural justice must be adhered to in matters of employee termination, even in the private sector. These principles ensure that an employee is given a fair opportunity to defend themselves, especially in the case of disciplinary proceedings. The court emphasized that employees have the right to a fair inquiry and should not be dismissed arbitrarily. In this case, Matthew was not given a proper opportunity to preempt his defense. The Supreme Court noted that there was lack of adherence to procedural fairness in the termination of Roger Mathew. The termination did not follow the proper procedure at law, as outlined under the Industrial Disputes Act or the bank internal rule. The court ruled that any decision taken by the employer regarding dismissal or termination must be based on a fair and transparent process, which includes giving the employee a chance to explain or defend their action. Unlawful termination. The court ruled that termination of the employee by South Indian Bank was unlawful due to non-compliance with procedural requirements and failure to follow natural justice principles. As a result, the court ordered the reinstatement of the employee and directed the bank to compensate him for the loss of earnings and other damages incurred due to wrongful dismissal. The court highlighted that employers, even in private institutions, must be cautious in ensuring that the dismissal or disciplinary action taken against an employee is based on fair procedure. The dismissal cannot be arbitrary and must be grounded in principles of equity and fair play. Significance of the judgment, protection of employee rights. This case reinforces the importance of employees' right in the workplace, particularly with respect to termination. The ruling emphasized that employees are entitled to fair hearing and due processes before being dismissed from their employment. The judgment reiterates the importance of natural justice in employment disputes. The decision underscored that even in the absence of statutory requirement, basic principles of justice must be followed in disciplinary proceeding, and an employee should not be deprived of their livelihood without a fair opportunity to present their case. The case also clarified the extent to which courts can intervene in employment disputes, particularly in cases of arbitrary termination. The court's ruling signified that judicial review is available to challenge unfair dismissals, and courts have the authority to ensure that procedural safeguards are upheld. The judgment is significant for a private sector, especially financial institutions like banks. It sets a precedent that procedural fairness and natural justice principles must be followed by private employers when dealing with employee termination. Employers are reminded that they cannot act unilaterally or without justification in matters of employee discipline and termination. So, friends, the conclusion of the judgment is the Rojer Mathew versus South Indian Bank case is a significant ruling regarding employees' rights and procedural fairness in the workplace. The Supreme Court judgment emphasized that employers must adhere to natural justice and fair procedures while terminating employees, particularly in private sector. The decision serves as a reminder to employers that they are bound by the rule of law in their dealing with employees, ensuring that terminations are not arbitrary or unjustified. It also underscored the judiciary role in protecting employees' rights to fair treatment, especially when their livelihood is at stake. That's all. God bless you all. Thank you for watching.